Alright, Devlog, October 2021. Recorded in November, because I'm late. I have... What have I done? Okay, first of all, I'm back at the original developer map. I switched to the other developer map because I needed more space. But now I'm back here because I have changed the look of the Brochure World, which is the dimension with all the creatures in it. So I've changed all of the weird blood red stone textures with sandstone that I made myself in Substance Designer. The old textures were they were baked in Blender and then were textures in Substance Painter, and it just didn't look good. It was just way too dark, and the sandstone is lighter. It's much easier on the eye, and I think it's a big improvement. So yeah, that's just that, and I will improve. This is just a quick mock-up that I've made in like a day, but I want to just further improve the overall look of this tile set. One of the textures I've not yet changed is the blood red marble texture. It's just too dark. It eats up all of the light. Like everything is nicely lit, and then you look at here and it's just too dark. So yeah. I'll talk about all the floating islands later, because I've made a whole bunch with a new workflow. For this month, I've not really done that much for the game, but I have been learning a lot of stuff in Blender. So that's the most important part. It has been a educational month for me, not really a productive month. I mean, productive in whatever. These are the new clothings. These are not finished, obviously, like that's a very basic texture, but it's just a basic mock-up again for what I want it to be. All the models are pretty much 99% done. It's just the texturing that needs high frequency detail, because for pretty much all of them I've slapped some Substance Painter textures in them and called it a day. This guy doesn't even have textures. He's the black sheep of the family right now. So yeah. This is pretty much the last part of all the things that I had to rework. So everything from this point on will be working on new stuff, which I'm very happy. I'm very happy that this is over and I'm finally finished with reworking all of the creature models. So yeah. Yeah, that's it. All right. What's next? New bake workflow. Oh yeah. All right. So I have been making some. You can already see them. I've made a whole bunch of floating rocks, and these are all procedurally generated. So if I hide this temple for a moment, and let's hide that as well. The size reference. This rock, if I go to, has a very high poly detail, and this is done with geometry nodes. So I have been learning how to use geometry nodes in Substance, like Blender. Yeah, I've been I have learned how to use geometry nodes. I mean, not fully. You can do some incredible stuff, but the basics at least for geometry nodes in Blender. So if I turn this off here, so this is what the geometry looks like without any modification. Then when I turn it back on, there's high frequency detail. There's also another procedural thing in the shader, and that is the division between the sand and the rocks. So the sand is like, so it takes the normal data from the geometry, and it basically looks at where it is basically a floor and where it's a ceiling and a wall. And it procedurally generates that. There is unfortunately one problem. So when I bake this high frequency model on a low resolution mesh, which can be used in games, this is a low resolution, I do lose the details inside of the crevices. So if I go to the high frequency mesh, you can see all of these like pockets of sand in the crevices of all of these like this frequency detail. But when I go to Unreal, those are gone. So what I need to do is I need to also make a map, or maybe even with vertex colors, and be able to reapply those sand pockets. So that would look a lot better. Because if I now go in the game, those sandboxes are not in here, so it looks a little bit flat, and especially with that rock formation there, it just looks weird. One would look like cake. So yeah. Another thing that I need to do is probably instead of using a flat color for the rocks and the sands, have an actual world texture that has again a rock texture and a sand texture. So if I go to the material, so material. Brochure unique flow. Yeah, here. So if I go to the main shader, yeah, I currently only have a color, 2 colors for rock and sand plugged into the shader, and I should replace these with an actual sand texture and an actual rock texture. That was probably gonna look a lot better. Oh, shaders. Okay, another thing I can quickly talk about is I'm also going to change the way I've been doing textures. So these textures are material instances instead of materials. And material instances are a lot more efficient to compile than having separate. So this right here is a shader. Every time when I close this or I need to save it, it needs to recompile this to code. Whereas material instances are code with parameters. So I don't have to compile this. If I make a change here, I'm not going to change anything, because otherwise I forget to change it back. But if I change anything here, I don't have to recompile anything. I can just instantly close it. So that's something I've been also changing with not just here, but I want to use material instances for everything. So here I have a bunch of material shaders. So this is the material shader for a basic skeletal mesh setup. And if I go to if I go to here, this is now a material instance instead of a shader. Whereas if I go to one of my older the Minotaur still has this. The Minotaur still uses shaders instead of material instances, shader instances. So so what I need to do is for all my old textures, I need to replace these with material instances, which is going to be one hell of a job. So that's going to just be, I mean, I think I can probably just do it in an all-nighter, but yeah. I mean, it's not the worst thing to do because it doesn't take a lot of mental capacity to change all of these to material instances. It's just boring work, but yeah. But again, since it doesn't take much mental capacity to do, I can do this for very long. So I can probably just pull an all-night for like 4 or 5 hours and replace all of the textures I have with material instances, so it's more efficient to compile. It's not going to change the performance in game, but it's just going to make it so I don't have to compile like thousands of shaders every time when I recompile the game. So yeah. That's something I'm gonna do, which is fun. So yeah, that's the bake workflow. So I have a high resolution texture, a high resolution mesh, and I then bake that to a low resolution mesh, which I then put in a normal map. So if I go to one of the normals, so here's the baked normal map for this one. So yeah. Another place where I've been baking normals is in the chainmail. So I have been making chainmail for creatures. So this guy has chainmail. And the way I used to do chainmail is I used to just go into Substance Painter and apply a chainmail texture and call it a day. The problem with using a chainmail texture is that it's gonna have horrendous seams, really weird geometry that's not going to make a lot of sense. And the worst part, it's going to have this really awful clipping around the edges, which is really difficult to resolve. So the way I've solved that is by basically just making my own chainmail and then baking the chainmail onto a flat mesh. So I think I still have the Sentinel variant. So if I go to the Sentinel variant and get rid of the bake and the chainmail. So yeah, so here I have the chainmail projection, which is made with geometry nodes. So this material instance is created with geometry nodes, because if I turn this off, yeah, this is a material. Now I remove the shader. Go back to geometry nodes. So there you go. So this is what it looks like before I apply the geometry nodes, and when I apply the geometry nodes, it's an actual 3D chainmail. And I can then bake that to a flat texture. And that's how I create chainmail now. So I have individual, and this is really quick to do. I just make a mock-up for how the chainmail should look. So like this. And I just apply this geometry node and I have chainmail. Very quick, very easy. I have now, I think, 4 enemies that have some type of chainmail to them. So yeah. That's that. Don't save. I don't know what I did. Oh yeah, subdivision surface modeling. So, okay, so I was actually going to make an entire tutorial on how to do subdivision surface modeling, but that was just way too excessive and beyond the scope of this. Basically, the point is it's a very interesting workflow. It doesn't work for everything. And it has its limitations, but for certain, especially like armor pieces, it's a really quick way of modeling stuff. So yeah. I've been using this modeling technique a lot this month and with good success. So yeah. Cloth physics workflow. Yeah, so I also got a new workflow for cloth physics. So this is my player clothing Blender file. So I've made a whole bunch of clothing for basically as a practice, but I have here a tactical shirt and tactical cargo pants. What makes it tactical? I don't know. So I got, if you can see, let's actually take the tucked in tack shirt with arms. There we go. So this is some clothing that I made with the new clothing workflow. And the way I do this is I literally use cloth physics to create clothing pieces and then again bake stuff from high frequency to low frequency meshes. So if I go to my non-shader, just to the flat, you can see there's no high frequency detail. And when I do this, there's all this high frequency detail. So where this comes from is from down here. So here I have a whole bunch of clothing pieces that I've made with cloth physics. So this, for example, these were the pants that I used to create the cargo pants. But this is just a cloth simulation on top of the female model. And this is then the lower resolution mesh with that mesh baked on top of it. I'm not going to showcase how I do it. It uses, if you're interested, let's see, go to preferences and add-ons. What's it called? Oh yeah, garment tool. Just Google garment tool for Blender and you will understand how I've made this. I'm not going to explain it myself. So yeah. So if I go to my, you can then see here the clothing in action in the customization. So yeah, so this exchanges the uniform type. This uniform I'm also gonna redo with cloth physics, but yeah, I'm gonna do that later. So yeah, I've also created, so dynamic armor works again. And I've made a new level 3 armor set. So this is the new level 3 armor set that I've made. Yeah. New clothing customization logic. Yeah, I've also changed the way clothing customization works. The old way of doing it was terrible. It basically looked at what the current clothing was, and it then based on that it would change the clothing. And now it just uses numerical indexes to create clothing customization. Material instances I already talked about, so that brings me to the end of this month. So to do so I'm finally gonna work on creature audio and finally finalizing some type of audio, because audio has been lacking. It's the part that has been lacking the most. So that's something I'm just gonna fully focus on this month. Volumetric clouds. So I really want to have okay, so I really want to have volumetric clouds under here. Like you're above the clouds. I think that's gonna look great. But that's something I'm gonna work on this month. And then for the rest, just many miscellaneous improvements. Many things that I've made last month for the enemy attacks are not currently present in the save system, so I need to add them to the save system. Props, I'm gonna have to make a whole bunch of props for the levels because the levels are very barren right now, so I'm just gonna make some props. And there currently is also a lot of missing audio, kind of feeds back into the new audio section. Because footstep audio, which is one of the few audio aspects that I did have working, is currently broken and not functional, so that's something I need to fix. So yeah. I mean, I got everything I wanted to do